Right, so now we want to look at writing an equation given a table. So the first thing we need to keep in mind is the general form of the exponential function. So that's y is equal to a times b to the x. And remember that that b value represents either our growth or decay factor. So when we're looking at the table of values, we need to pick out an a value and we need to pick out what that growth or decay factor is. So when I'm looking at the tables of values, I'm really concentrating on the y. So I want to figure out what the pattern is going to be. And we know that from a table with an exponential function, we're concentrating on what we're multiplying by to get to the next value. So if I'm thinking about what I have to do to 3.5 to get to 7 in terms of multiplication, well, 3.5 times 2 gets me 7. And I'm just going to check to make sure that this is the same all the way down. So 7 times 2 gives me 14. 14 times 2 gives me 28. And 28 times 2 gets me 56. So this times 2 is representing my growth or decay factor. So then I want to think, okay, well, is this growth or is it decay? Well, it's easy to see in your table of values. Are your numbers increasing going down or are your numbers decreasing going down? Well, from 3.5 to 7 to 14 to 28 to 56, that must mean that we are growing. So this is a growth function. So this means that our b value is 2, which makes sense because for a growth model, our b value should always be greater than 1. So then how do we know what the a value is? Well, in our table of values, there's also something that will show us exactly what the a value is. The a value is always located where the x value is 0. So since our x value is 0 here and the corresponding y value is 7, that's telling us that our a value is 7. So with these two pieces of information here, we can write out what our exponential equation or function is. So I would write this as f of x or y is equal to our a value of 7 times our b value of 2 raised to the x. All right, so let's look at another one. So again, to figure out what the pattern is to get my growth or decay factor, I want to look at my y values. And if we notice going downwards, we have 81 to 27 to 9 to 3 to 1. This is actually a decay function because our numbers or our y values are decreasing. So with a decay function, we know that our b value is always going to be somewhere in between 0 and 1. So if I figure out what the pattern is between these y values, sometimes it might be a little bit tricky with some of the bigger numbers. So if you need to start kind of at the bottom with some smaller numbers, you can. So I want to know, what am I doing to 9 to get to a 3? Well, 9 divided by 3 gives me 3, but remember that we're talking in terms of multiplication. So the same thing as dividing by 3 is multiplying by 1/3. And I'm just going to check to make sure this makes sense for all of my values in my tables. So to get from 3 to 1, I'm dividing by 3 or I'm multiplying by 1/3. I can go back up here and check these two. So to get from 81 to 27, that is 81 divided by 3 does give me 27. So that's also multiplication by 1/3. And to get from 27 to 9, 27 divided by 3 is 9. So that would mean that I am also multiplying by 1/3. So this is telling me that since all of these values are exactly the same all the way down, my b value is 1/3, which makes sense because 1/3 is between 0 and 1. So then I need to know, well, what is my a value? So what is that number that's going to go right in front of that b value? So if I go to my table of values, I'm picking out the place where my x is 0. So this is actually telling me that my a value, where x is 0, is 9. So my function would be f of x, or y, is equal to my a value of 9 times my b value of 1/3 raised to the x power.